Hey, Andy Sadler. Welcome to Masters of MEDDIC. It is incredible to have you on the show. The listeners won't know this, but this has been a long time coming. I think you were actually the very first person I approached to see if you'd come on the show when it was just an idea where I didn't know where it was going to go, before the book was out, before any of this stuff was a reality. And I've been playing, I think, cat and mouse with you, your calendar, busy guy, ever since then. So I'm very, very, very excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks. No, it's good to be here. Thanks, buddy.
Cool. So for those that don't know you, those that have been maybe living in a cave or new to our industry, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you came into this wonderful industry of ours.
Yeah, sure. Very flattering statement there, by the way. I'm sure many people have got no idea who I am. I've been in enterprise sales now for, 25 years, actually. There you go. Originally found myself as a very young guy in PTC in the late 90s. Oh my God, that's a long time ago. And really interesting. I was speaking to one of my very junior reps this morning. As a junior rep at PTC, selling CAD/CAM software in a very industrialized part of Northern England, they taught us two things. They taught us MEDDIC, and they taught us competitive battle cards, and that was it. And we had to go out and sell the product based on that. So that's kind of the biggest learning curve you're ever going to have. And then from there, stayed in enterprise sales, PTC, Blade Logic. PTC. Essential Software, Blade Logic, and a couple of CRO jobs in the UK, and then Sigla FX, and now Imply, predominantly around medical.
Cool. Yeah, that's super interesting. I think it's so funny to see the pathway you've taken there, which I think is what a lot of people, certainly some people earlier in their careers listening to the show will be trying to emulate, particularly those who are this side of the pond in Europe, where generally, although I think it's diversifying now, a lot of the major MEDDIC companies, a lot of those major tech companies have started and been founded in the US, or even if they haven't, they've kind of moved their headquarters over there. So to have that kind of career that you've had, and then take some CRO jobs as well along the way, is interesting and different to a lot of people listening, I think. Yeah,
it's kind of interesting. I hope it's not too contentious by saying I don't like the term MEDDIC companies, because MEDDIC is a deal qualification process. It's not a company ethos. But it is a way of. We honestly used it at PTC, and I've subsequently used it as a way of discussing very quickly between commercial teams. So I'm with you around the US, because I think PTC was one of the first. Well, it was the fastest growing software company in the history of software companies. But they definitely brought that over, and I was a rep, and then I was a manager. But in terms of Europe, I think there's enough. There was enough curiosity, and there is now enough organizations that want to emulate that, that scale and growth type model. So yeah, I think if the listeners are thinking, do I have to move to Silicon Valley? No. The thing that's changed, Andy, over time is the investors, the VCs. So ever more so now, you're getting European organizations, or rather software companies starting in Europe. Which you never got in, you haven't really had in the maybe 20 years ago. But now you've got lots of unicorns and even decacorns starting over here in Europe.
Yeah, it's great to see, isn't it? And it's I think it's representative of what I think is such a big part of why the second C came into MEDDIC of competition, which is kind of that ability that we've had since since PTC days, where you knew who your competitors were on probably less than one hand, and they kind of there was not really too many other choices. The customers weren't going to build themselves, but nowadays with the proliferation of the cloud and all these abilities that people have to build platforms and no code and all this sort of stuff, all of a sudden you've got the ability in most people's hands to start a technology company. And so, that I think means you don't have to be in Silicon Valley, because you don't have to be sort of hiring developers that are nearby. You can kind of do it anywhere. And particularly with, the acceleration through things like COVID, remote works again. So it's, I think it's interesting that I think we're going to see much more of this around sort of distributed companies and teams and that sort of thing, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. Let's talk about second C in MEDDIC. I actually think the second C in MEDDIC, I spoke about battle cards, and battle cards was our second C in MEDDIC in PTC, because that was who was our competition. And pretty much at PTC, if you looked at the competition and the way to compete with the competitor, one of the things you'll learn about me, if you don't really know, Andy, is I'm a plagiarist. I bring other people's work into everything I can. Yep. And by that, I mean authors and researchers. So the second C in MEDDIC for me is the art of war. It's sort of C, right? So if you look at what battle cards were at PTC, we were only a direct sales force. So we had a 3-to-1 advantage over everyone. So our second C in MEDDIC, our battle card was get them in a fight, because we're going to win.
Right.
Now, what subsequently over time, if you look at the art of war, know your competitor as well as you know yourself, and you've just mentioned competition, the proliferation of competition becomes harder, but with access to data, with social media, it's only the, dare I say, lazy who don't take that approach. To understand your strengths and your competitive strengths enables you to decide what your competitive strategy will be. Will it be direct? Will it be indirect? Will it be divisional, where you're going to win and they're going to win, or will it be a delay strategy? And we could talk all day about that. I've spent a lot of time reading the history of warfare to understand that.
Well, you and I think, share this in, I'm kind of famous amongst my sort of peers and friends for turning everything into an analogy. And I have two favorite subjects, two favorite topics for analogy. One of which you've talked about, which is the war analogy. Because, I think about sales as being so similar, and you're touching on it there about, you've got the frontline sellers. It's in all the terminologies we use. You mentioned battle cards, frontline sellers, and you've got sort of go-to-market, which I always imagine the go-to-market when you're doing those beginning of year planning sessions, and you've got, your CMO, CRO, and all those stakeholders. You almost imagine it being like a big map, a big battlefield map, and you're kind of moving, in the battle terms, you're moving forces, battalions and things, but in the go-to-market terms, you're moving budget, you're moving resources around to kind of, and what I really like about how you described that analogy of the battle there is, you're talking about the art of war in Sun Tzu, which is, ancient times. But as warfare's evolved, and as competition's evolved, you've had to kind of evolve with it. So it's kind of what you were talking there about. Whilst it's become in a lot of ways more complex to compete, there's more competitors, there's more ways that you can be competing, from being just, in the PTC days, as you mentioned, it was just your rivals. Nowadays, you've got to compete not just against other solutions that have vast arrays of overlap with yours, not just your rivals, but things that do the same things or a bit of what you do and a bit less, to self-build, to other initiatives that are coming on, because there's just so many opportunities available to C-level decision makers now. So you have to, just the same way as if you're a general, you haven't just got your archers and your samurais as the art of war have. You've got all of these other things as well. So I'm totally with you on the analogy there, for sure.
No, absolutely, and it's not a shallow analogy, because and I don't want to talk about warfare because it will divide your audience, but Winston Churchill was an amazing champion builder.
Yes.
In getting the Americans to participate in the Second World War, and he had a champion building strategy. He understood what was in it for his potential champion. And then he had to he identified that champion in the US president. He understood what was in it for him. He started to understand the negative consequences if he didn't put his battle force behind the battle around trade, and then got him to participate. So I don't think we're talking about human behavior. So human behavior, whether it be doing a $10 million deal in a worldwide bank, or whether it be anything, it's human behavior. So the first C in MEDDIC is about personal understanding personal wins and aligning that win to your win.
Yes.
That's the real art of champion building.
Yeah, absolutely. We used to have this stat at Sprinkler that was, I've been saying it for years, that it was like 85% of people that buy, that were the champion for the seller when they were selling Sprinkler, got promoted within their first 6 months of buying Sprinkler. I recently found an old notebook from back then. It was 65%. And I think I just added another 5% each time I mentioned it. But to your point, that statistic was probably the best line, pound for pound, you could say in a meeting with a potential champion, because it just aligned them with what could be one of, not definitively, because not everyone's motivated the same way, but would align these people at the time where social was up and coming and a big mover with, the art that, you're maybe the first person in this organization who is kind of a social media executive, but if you do play this right, then you could be the person running this department in 6 months, a year's time, and have a team underneath you. And that for me, I don't think without that line, I would have seen what you're talking about there, about the sort of vested interest. I would have seen it so clinically as I did with that line.
What's really interesting, Andy, is, again, to bring in different processes or theories or structured approaches, as opposed to it just being an acronym, is in the mind of that potential champion, I would argue the fear of not doing it first, as opposed to the ego of doing it first, is actually the driver, not is actually the driver for doing it. So fear in the sort of neural system, fear outweighs greed.
Yes.
So if you could be as hungry, if you're a wild animal, you could be as hungry as you like, but if a lion comes around the corner, you're going to run away.
Yes.
So understanding how we make decisions is important in that champion building as well.
Yeah, and what you're touching on there is fascinating to me, because I often, as many people do, split sales into a science and an art. And MEDDIC is often associated with the science because it's, as you mentioned, a qualification framework. But I think that what you're really touching on there in my mind is the differentiation that comes with having what I class as more being the art. And that's about the ability for what you were talking about there to read in that person that they are actually more impacted by the fear than they are of like the opportunity that's there. And I think being able to see, having the EQ to be able to see that in a person and spot it, and then obviously react to it and sort of empower the opportunity that comes from that is a very, for me, and I don't know what you think. I mean, you're probably one of the most. You probably recruited more salespeople pound for pound than most sales leaders out there. It's one of the things that I don't think gets discussed or focused on enough. Is that kind of real EQ bit? Is that something you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I did it's no secret. My recruitment criteria, it's no secret. And the first one is intelligence. And intelligence is broken down into 3 elements. IQ, can you learn and retain information? EQ, can you control your emotion under pressure? And I repeat, your natural reaction to the unknown is to react with your right side of your brain, with your emotion. Your left side of the brain, your logic controls it because you know that it's a man in a bear suit and not a bear. And then the last one, which the SAS called rapid intuitive experience, which is basically how you make the decisions. So you make a decision which is E first, then minus I. If the I is bigger, you'll make an intelligent decision. And if the E is bigger, you'll make an emotional decision. So you might shoot the wrong person.
Right.
So the way you overcome that is by developing I, which is knowledge, and learning and learning and learning and learning and learning. Therefore, you'll make more better decisions than poor decisions. So in the recruitment process, you're absolutely correct. You know, the first thing we look at in recruitment is intelligence, because ultimately the acronym behind your head is both a deal qualification process, but it's a way of communicating. And you need to be pretty smart to be able to do it. The worst, and to come back to your art and science part, it is a science approach. The way it's implemented is the art. So I can ask you outright, hey, Andy, what's your personal win? You're not going to tell me. Yeah. Now, if I've got to know you personally and we've shared some things which has shown my vulnerable side, and you've gone, oh wow, that's really interesting, and we've harmonized on something, and then I say, hey, why are you doing this? And you say, you tell me. Yes. You've told me in a different way. Okay, yes. So we can write down all the questions, and we can get a 24-year-old SDR to ask the questions, and they're not going to get the answers, right? So it's about both that science and art coming together.
Yeah, I love the way you articulated that. That's beautiful, and I feel it. So I think people listening to this, you know, it's kind of one of those bits where I'm sort of in my head, I'm thinking this is going to be a great soundbite, because you can just imagine people nodding along with that, and it's very rarely articulated it so eloquently. So thank you for that, and I really do believe in this a lot. And there's so many, you know, through my experiences and through my career, there's so many little sort of as well as sort of building that rapport and building that relationship, and almost like the credibility and the right to kind of allow that person to open up to you. There's so many different sort of bits of psychology that go into it. And it does come back to what we were saying a moment ago, though, of having the ability to know that you've earned the right to engage in that kind of mutual exchange.
Look, the big thing, and I've done some lectures at Imperial College on this. So funny. So I was doing a lecture, and I'm in this lecture theatre in Imperial College, and there's like 150 or 200 MBA students.
Yeah.
So I say, quick question, guys. How many of you want to go in sales? Nobody puts their hand up.
Yeah.
I was like, cool, okay, no problem. How many of you want to go into business? Everyone puts their hand up. Yeah. I'm like, cool. You're an MBA. Okay, that's kind of crazy. Can you define business? And they're like, oh, you know, we offer this service, and great. Who do you offer it to? Well, we offer it to clients. Great. How are you going to interact? Well, let me kind of demystify that for you. You're going to pipeline generate, which means you might market, you might, you know, whatever, and then eventually you'll sit down and you'll agree a contract. Yeah. That's selling. Wow. So how many want to go into sales? 150 people put their hand. Okay. Yeah. So, and the acronym behind you is the secret sauce to what, you know, now they don't teach it at university. They don't teach it at business school. Although I actually believe they should. In America, they do teach sales at business school. In England, you go to a dinner party and say, oh, what do you do? I'm this. Oh, what do you do? I'm a sales guy. Oh, don't talk to him.
Yeah.
So it's really kind of strange, the psychology behind this. In my opinion, it's all wrong.
Yeah. it's my favorite. It's one of the downside to that thing is, it does have a certain stigma, which I think is on ourselves to fix, by the way. But there is an upside to that dinner party conversation of well, not so much dinner party, but I find it when I'm sort of mixing with certain crowds that maybe the school crowd, and you're kind of, you don't want to have to get into like what you do and talk about it. If you just say you're a salesperson, people leave you alone. They think it's a good tactic.
The reason I said that is when you spoke about the right to ask the question, okay? And a lot of junior people, and you see it on LinkedIn with their job titles and so forth, is they shy away from what they're actually there for. And if I get brought in, because I've got a bit of grey hair, if I get brought into a deal, I will genuinely say, hey, I'm trying to sell you some software, but I'm only going to sell you the software if there's something in it for you.
Yes.
And that transparency, I think, earns the right to then continue in that level, as opposed to sometimes people are trying to present themselves as something else. Yeah. But it doesn't help them when they come to champion building, because that level of transparency is going to hurt them, because they've not been very clear and direct.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I think like I always sort of, I take the mickey out of people that have those kind of, industry title, insert here, consultant, or whatever it is in their LinkedIn title. It's pretending to be a consultant, because I always say to them is what are you expecting is going to happen? That you're going to, engage in some free consultancy and then sort of slip an order form, and the customer's going to go, you're a salesperson. Oh, well, you got me, so I better just sign this order form. And what's going to happen, as we know happens, is the customer goes, well, thank you very much, Andy. That was really useful. We'll consider it. And you're like, wait, what? No. What about my order form? And you end up wasting your time.
Yeah. Again, just to bring this back to the acronym behind you, and again, I'll bring some real life example into that statement. I was on a call again this morning with a gentleman we've just promoted, actually, from an SDR, and it's his first role as a quota-carrying salesperson. He's very excited. And as all people, the driver is he doesn't want to be embarrassed.
Yes.
So therefore, he's gone from this amazing qualifier, and in the eye of Spin, in the eye of MEDDIC, we use Spin. Mm-hmm. The identification of pain, but then that's situational, and then we take that pain through a process. He was brilliant at it, and now he's a sales guy. He's gone into he's identifying pain as in the situation, and he's solving it with answers.
Yes.
And he's wondering why his deals are all his pipeline is drying up. Mm-hmm. So the ego of I'm not just a salesperson, I'm a consultant, therefore I've got the answers, as opposed to your job in the I in MEDDIC is to understand, why is that important to you? And is that a pain?
Yes.
Is that a problem? Why is that a problem?
Yeah.
Why has it not been solved before? Really simple questions, which means this is closed, these are open, and they're talking and giving you data. That gets lost in my opinion. And that's the one part of, and I repeat, I've taken MEDDIC and I've put in different processes for each of the stages. In the I part, I spent a long time there because it's not complete enough in just the identification of pain.
And I think what you're talking about there, actually, it all comes together, because I think if you look at the reason why people are hiding the fact that they're a salesperson in their LinkedIn profile, in their persona, in their behavior, is because they're not confident enough of themselves, of their proposition, of the value that they bring to the table. And therefore, they're kind of putting themselves on the back foot into defense mode. And to your point there about the gentleman you promoted, that what I like about it is that it really shows this scenario where he is engaged in this opportunity, and because he hasn't gone through those cycles of winning deals, of seeing the value he delivers, his persona is instantly like, I need to keep this customer interested. That customer's got a problem, I need to show I can solve it. They've got a problem, I show them solve it. When you and I know that the problems resonate when you dig deeper. The problems become, that's why I sort of go from the identify to the indicate, to the implication of pain. And that's kind of really resonates where the customer goes from, yeah, I have got this problem. And yeah, it would be nice to solve it, to being like, oh, okay, that's how much it's costing me. That's okay. It's more than I considered, to being like, okay, all right, please just stop talking. I just put an order form in front of me. I need to solve this immediately, if not sooner. And I think that really comes back to that confidence of just being confident, just to sit there a little bit longer and dig a bit deeper and just, just sort of dig in a little bit more. And I always use the analogy to kind of set the mindset of this of, have you seen the film Limitless with Bradley Cooper?
I don't think so.
Okay, it's one of my favorite films. I won't spoil it for those that are listening haven't seen it, but I'll cut it short. It's basically set in New York. Bradley Cooper plays this author who's down and out. He's got a book. He's missed his deadline, and his girlfriend leaves him, and he's really like down and out. And he meets an old friend who's a former drug dealer turned sort of. He looks a bit suave. And quite a long story short, they have this pill called NZT, which basically turns your brain from having 4% of its capacity to the full 100%. So you can learn a language like that. You can learn Kung Fu like that. You can learn to play classical piano like that. And you know, obviously you can put it to learning stocks and trades. And the film goes on a certain course. But what I always try and say to people who have seen the film is, you as a salesperson, in the role you're in, you should feel the same way as a salesperson selling NZT would feel about their product. Because if you don't, if you're in a position of selling a product and you don't feel it's the best product out there, you don't feel that it delivers huge value to your customers, then you're in the wrong, not just the wrong company, potentially the wrong job, because you shouldn't be selling the product you're selling unless you feel that. So putting yourself into this situation with NZT, where you've got a pill with no side effects that turns someone's brain from being 4% to 100%. If I was to be selling that to you now and you were to start going, yeah, I'm not really sure. Actually, it's £100 a pill. Coffee's only £4 and I get a kick from caffeine. I would be like, see you later, Andy. I'm going to move on to people that value my time. I'm going to move on to people that are qualified. And I think if everyone had that mindset in sales, we wouldn't have to hide where we are. We would be much more credible, much more confident, and a lot less time for customers and salespeople would be wasted.
Are you the drug dealer in that analogy?
Say it again, sorry?
Are you the drug dealer in that analogy?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Like it's not approved, this NZT thing, but yeah. But I do think it's a fun analogy because it just puts you in the mindset of thinking, actually, if I did have something like that is just black and white, no question about it, super valuable, you would behave completely differently to how we behave as salespeople. But as salespeople, we've got behind us all of these case studies, proof points, metrics that really show that we deliver value. So we should just lean into that, be a bit more confident with it. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I agree. Cool. So my other favorite type of analogy, other than war analogies, is one that I think will be up your street as well, being a former ex-football player. And we say football because that's what the world calls it, except for one continent that refers to it by something else. I can't remember what it is, not very referred to very often. But we're talking about football, the game you play with the ball at your feet, which you were a former professional player, right?
Long time ago.
Long time ago.
Very long time ago. Very long time ago.
What I love about that and the opportunity to talk to you about this is I as I said earlier, I'm kind of famous for my analogies. The one that's right at the top of my list is the football analogy. It's, for me, it fits so beautifully with our craft, with our industry, of how we go to market, how we act, how we, all those things we talk about. When you're recruiting, is there anything you look for in potential hires that kind of points to this kind of background or?
Yeah, well, I've got 2 points on that. I'm going to shout out a good mate of mine, Bruce Hunter, who was my first manager at PTC. And he was then my AVP when I was an RD. I was only about 25, 26. Bruce was only a couple of years older. And he said, we were recruiting, and I was trying to recruit number 9s all the time, or number 7s. And he said, sometimes every team needs a Gary Neville. I've just never forgotten, and whether I've been a first, second, or third line manager, I've always kind of kept that analogy is you do need to build a team, and if you build a team of number 9s, you're gonna probably fail because they're gonna eat each other. So I touched on the recruitment. I told you one of the number one recruitment criteria, which is around intelligence. The second one being coachability. And you're right, my sporting background was hugely valuable in my professional career, because ultimately, when you're playing sport, you spend 99% of the time on the training pitch and 1% in a competition, right? So, again, another great mentor of mine, Mark Cranny, says, if you've got 8 hours to chop a tree and you've got an axe, what do? Well, you spend 7.5 hours sharpening it and half an hour chopping. Okay, not 8 hours chopping. So to simple analogies that say, you spend the time in the classroom or the strategy room or the boardroom or whatever room you want to call it, the whiteboard, and that's where your analogy of battlefields came up. But to do that, you have to have discipline. If you're training under 7-year-old footballers, boys or girls, they just want to go on the pitch and run, and you can't stop them, right? Just let them run. If you've got a bunch of 17-year-olds, they'll sit down and listen and strategize and understand what it means. And that's the analogy you're referring to, which is, we have to have the mentality of stop, learn, and then go forward. And part of that is to be audibly ready if somebody says, why wouldn't I use this? Now, if you don't know the answer, the quick question is, why is that important to you? And that should be always a question, by the way. But ultimately, you're going to need to know, metrics. And a metric isn't just a number. Mm-hmm. A metric is a metric that matters to the customer, but also a reference case study that you've got as an example of it. Otherwise, it's just a hollow statement. And if you want to take that even further, you've then got to go, okay, well, and then how did they do that? Now we're into the decision criteria, technical. So, and it's like, well, can you give me an example of that? Now we're into champions, and we're hoping that our champions are not just going to defend the cause of where they were, they're going to defend my cause and be used for the economic buyer in the deal that I'm at. So, learning this isn't just learning it, as I keep saying it, it's not a deal qualification process, it's a communication methodology. Mm-hmm. To do that, it takes a lot of time. When I was at BMC, when Blade Logic were acquired, obviously I wasn't going to stay at BMC because it's a big company, but we got an opportunity to try on a bigger scale than we'd had before some of the approaches. We weren't necessarily finding the right salespeople in the recruitment process, so we decided to build them. Yeah. So I built a postgraduate program. Yeah, and the postgraduate program was basically 3 months in a classroom.
Okay.
Okay, and literally 3 months in a classroom, probably 85 exams, I think, in that process. And then 3 months in the field, and then a final exam and a qualification, then a promotion. That was testing the theory that we're now both discussing, which is, is it a learnt trait or is it an art? Mm-hmm. And my argument was it can be taught, therefore it can be learned, therefore it can be broken down into. Can't remember how many modules we had in 3 months, but it was if you just take 2 hours, divide that by four a day, 20 a week, times that by however many 12 weeks. Okay, so and we successfully did it. We managed to get we did it for 3 years, and we got probably 25. We did 10 a year, 10 people, and we taught them everything. These people had no commercial background at all. They were recruited straight out of Imperial or London Business School.
Brilliant.
And they would talk MEDDIC, Spin, Powerbase, everything.
Right.
And some of them have gone on to have amazing careers. I won't name them all now, but some have gone on to do amazing careers. So that's a long answer to what did I take from my background as a structured athlete to being in a structured business sense.
Yeah. But I think there's so much in that because the fundamentals over time remain the same. So, if we're talking about football, we're talking about, movement, we're talking about touch, we're talking about all of those things remain the same. What changes around it, maybe the formations, maybe the, wingers become a big part of the game. Maybe they don't, maybe it comes back to the center, and all these different things change over time. And for me, that's the same thing as we see in our industry where, things like social media come onto the scene. Things like the prevalation of information on the internet means that customers are coming to us much more informed than they were before. But it's the fundamentals always remain the same. And what's fascinating to me is you mentioned MEDDIC there, but you also mentioned power-based selling and spin selling, two books, two kind of frameworks, if you like, that are, I think probably older than I've been selling, I think perhaps, and certainly in the case of power-based selling or spin, I think it's been around a really long time.
Absolutely. The only three, I repeat, I'll take, 30% of Neil Rackham and I'll stick it into the pain part. I'll take 40% of Powerbase and I'll stick it into the champion and the competitive differentiation part.
Yeah,
and also a bit into EB. Because again, if we look at Powerbase, many people fall for job titles, and in Powerbase you can have authority but no influence. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You could have influence and no authority. You can have, so that an influencer with no authority means that they've not got the job title, but they've got all the influence to influence the EB. So when we talk about EB, the one thing that has changed, Andy, in time is EB used to be, who is the EB, the economic buyer, who's got final discretion and has got the ability to say yes and no. Not the person who writes the check, the person who's got the ultimate discretion. Mm-hmm. And then we used to say at PTC, we had to meet them. Mm-hmm. Now, that's in much more of a structured organization where everyone is in the same box, in the same room.
Yes.
When you're selling to a manufacturing company in Blackburn, that was often the case. Mm-hmm. The engineers were on this level and the management on this level, and the CEO was over there, probably in a different building, but on the same area. Mm-hmm. Well, with digitalization and with globalization, the EB could be in China, Yeah. So we're not going to meet the EB. So I, in my implementation of MEDDIC, modified that to who is the EB, mm-hmm. and can we access the EB via influence or direct? Mm-hmm. So to build an influence chart, which we do in all of our deals, and we need to have the EB named, and we need to have triangulated that person is the EB, and then can we have an influence line to the EB? And the influence lines are invisible. So mm-hmm. by the way, the influence line could be inside or outside the organization, or inside or outside the deal you're working on. Mm-hmm. So we have a deal at the moment, and I'm obviously not going to mention the deal, and I'm not going to mention anything about it, but we're using another technology company as accessing the EB via that company. And we're hijacking their influence line because mm-hmm. they've got influence. And if you want to use Powerbase, influence means value plus recognition. So value was delivered by this partner. The EB recognizes the value came from this partner. So that's an influence line.
Brilliant.
Instated, go back to science. We get to this partner, we hijack their influence line. How do we do that? We deliver value to this partner, they recognize it, they're like, great, and they'll take us straight there. So we cut out all of the politicalness in the organization. Yeah. EB takes us straight. So the best sales guys in the world, in my opinion, are using influence to get around the organization, not necessarily the old organizational chart structure.
Yeah, and the thing that you've nailed there, I think, is what's I think so important. I think so many people miss is that what you've described there is for me elite level selling. You know, it's taking a zoomed out approach, taking a collaborative approach. You know, that person working on that deal is involving probably you, maybe some other people in the team, to really kind of get a good view, get some perspectives, get some real excitement, but also different viewpoints on that deal, and you say outside people as well. So you're leaving no stone unturned in what is, as you mentioned a moment ago, quite a difficult process often is to get access or engagement with the economic buyer. So your approach there, because you recognize how critically important it is or how valuable it is to the success of your deal, that it's worth doing these things. And I always say it's a bit like this. It's like that extra mile that people talk about in customer service a lot, going that extra mile where there's less traffic. People often say to me, you know, it's really hard to get to the economic buyer. I say, good. It is really good. You wouldn't want it to be easy, because then it would level all that additional great work you've done there. It would make that easy, and then it wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't be rewarded for the great selling that you're doing there. So, and it's not just about your rival doing that, because that economic buyer by nature will have a number of initiatives and, you know, not a unlimited budget. So, you know, it's about you, as you say, bringing that value to them in a credible way, so that they can kind of, you know, you're more likely to have a successful outcome. So I think I loved hearing how you articulated that.
Look, let me give you a real simple example of influence, right? Johnny is going through, let me use Sprinkler. I don't even know whether you're connected to Luca and the guys at Sprinkler anymore, but let's say, let me use me. Okay. Luca's a good friend of mine.
Yep.
I've never worked at Sprinkler. But Luca's a really good mate, you know, good friend of mine. I've known Luca for a very, very long time. Johnny's going through a recruitment process, and he's passed all of the processes. And Johnny knows me, and I don't really know Johnny that well, but I know someone who does know Johnny. And then Luca calls me up and says, "Hey, Andy, I'm interviewing Johnny tomorrow. I see you're connected. How do you know him?" I'm like, "Give me a minute." I call someone I trust. They're like, "Oh my God, Johnny's very bad for these reasons." "Hey, Luca, I think Johnny's pretty bad, you know, for these reasons. Johnny's over." That's influence. Mm. Luca trusts me. I trust him. I value blah, 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 right? So Johnny's like, "What happened?" Everyone's like, "Don't know." Yeah. Johnny's looking at the org chart going, "But I covered all Luca's direct reports. Yeah. They all think I'm great. What happened?" Yeah. And there's an example. So
that's a brilliant example. That's a brilliant example.
So that's a real life example. That happens in real life. So, you know, I'm a little, you know, I've been in the industry for quite a long time now. A lot of the people who were engineering managers when I started are now CTOs, or a lot of guys who are now CEOs. So it becomes a pretty narrow market eventually. Mm-hmm. And you're not more than 2 steps away if you want to use your brain.
Yes.
To get that level of influence, right? So part of that is understanding the decision process. Going back to MEDDIC, understanding the decision process for the deal. It might not be needed. You know, you got to understand, because if you got the EB wrong and you haven't stepped that out and in a flow chart, and you don't know who the EB is, again, lazy selling. You're not the first organization to sell to that company. Go and find a friend who sold to that company. They're probably going to tell you their learnings pretty quick, and that's going to save you a world of pain.
Exactly right. Yeah, and then likewise, you know, bringing it back to, you know, if you the Johnny example there, if Johnny had a good champion, at least, you know, he's going to find out potentially ahead of the ahead of the call that's been set up about his reference check with third party person outside the company. There's a chance that they'll be ahead of that. Worst case, he will at least be able to kind of work on the back foot from it, because, you know, there's probably been all cases in everyone's career where they've worked somewhere where it didn't work out, and they would get a bad reference from that place. So being able to, and the same with bringing it back to sales, there'll be that one customer where there's been a bad implementation or a product that didn't hit the ground as much as it should have done. And so that's bringing it back to sales, that kind of understanding that pool of references, but using the champion to make sure that you're on top of where they're looking and who they're talking to, I think is as equally important.
Well, one of the parts of champion development, which is the second step of champion building, is development being teaching, is you need to teach the champion objection prevention. the objections that are going to come up, and these are how you prevent them from happening, Mr. Champion. Whether it be, it's going to be too expensive. So rather than being able to handle that objection, to put that in the hand of the champion so that he prevents the objection from arriving.
Yeah.
So you're probably thinking this is expensive, but let me tell you why it's not. So look, a champion is a champion is a salesperson who works for you in the inside. So, and they defend your cause. That means you've recruited them. That means they're your responsibility as a staff member, just not on your paycheck.
Yeah.
So there's nothing more important than champions. But you'll be surprised at how many people go from thinking they've identified a champion to then using a champion, and then the champion failing, and then they're moving on. But what they missed is they missed developing the champion.
Yes.
It's no different to recruiting a new salesperson, not teaching them your product, and then putting them in the field, and then them failing every discovery meeting, and then you firing the salesperson. Well, it's actually your fault because you never developed it.
100%. Yeah, I could not agree more with that. I think that's exactly right. And I think there's so many parallels there about how we enable our teams to go to market. And I know you're a fan of the command of the message from the PTC days, and obviously force management, taking that to the kind of the next level.
I'm actually not, by the way. I don't believe the word command. I think that's wrong. I changed it at BMC to lead the message.
Lead the message. I like that. Yeah.
I command was a PTC term where we did have command and control, and me and John Kaplan can argue all day long about that, but I don't think
I would pay to see that. If it's big news at the moment, all this sort of white collar boxing YouTubers, I'd like to see two of the greatest sales leaders of our time go. Maybe people listening along, hit up on the comments in LinkedIn if you want to see, in the ring, command of the message versus lead of the message, Andy versus John. That would be something.
Have you ever met Kaplan?
I have, yeah.
He's a bit bigger than me, right? So
but you're the former elite athlete. You've got to speak. Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah, good point.
So, but no, I'll fight dirty.
It would be an MMA game rather than a boxing match. I see. Yeah,
Kaplan's funny. It's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, he's been an incredible inspiration to me from my career. I think I that's no secret. So what a good shout out to Mr. John Kaplan, the Mr. Uncommon, who's doing this is his catchphrase, isn't it? I love it. Yeah. Cool. Well, Andy, sir, thank you so much. This has been, an absolute pleasure. And like I always say with these things, for me, it's just a great chance for me to learn from the best. And to make no doubt about it, today I feel like my SQ, sales IQ, whatever you want to call it, is grown. So thank you so much for your time. And
good luck with the book.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much. And if there's anyone listening to this that's up on the up in their career and wants to go and join a great company, I always whenever I see you, Andy, you're always recruiting. You must do hundreds of interviews a year.
Yeah. So if that was a book applying for Imply, absolutely. And one of the things that I think is hopefully coming across is I believe that it's about development and it's about learning, and the best role we have in the company is sales development rep. Mm-hmm. Why? Because that is the safest place to learn. And, people have a lot of stigma attached to that. All they're doing is qualifying and doing inbound and qualifying. I'm like, no. My average age of an SDR is 27. Yeah. By the way, the average length they stay as an SDR is 6 months, but then they get promoted and fly. So, because I believe it's sales development, so they're being developed.
Brilliant. I love that.
If this is a shout out for anyone who wants to join us, then we're recruiting, but I want to recruit and build our own, right? So all the best teams in the world, you go back to the Busby Babes, you talk about football, go back to Alex Ferguson, even though I'm a United fan, I'll go back to Liverpool and talk about Paisley and all those guys. have all built from within, and that's what I want to do. So, and that's what I've done in my career, and that's what we're doing at Imply. So, yeah, if you want to apply, go for it.
And I know one thing from knowing you for as long as I have, Andy, that we're fortunate enough in this industry that if we're successful, we earn very good money. And so, it becomes a point where it's about more than that. And I know I can tell by the way that you conduct yourself, the way you kind of build these great teams, that I think it's more around kind of, I love this sort of thing of like legacy over currency. And I think that if you think back about what we've talked a bit about today, from the PTC days through to, what we didn't actually dig into too much, but it was like the Blade Logic and the Blade Logic Mafia and the proliferation of success that came from that. I always say to young, enthusiastic people getting into this industry that you want to attach your cart to the next PTC, the next Blade Logic, the next one of those things that it is. And I would call it an apprenticeship with you, sir. That must be one of the best out there.
I don't know. I've got a lot of LinkedIn recommendations, and you can speak to any people who've worked for me. Don't go into leadership unless you want to develop people.
Yeah. Certainly
don't go into leadership for income. You'll get stock and wealth, but you won't get income. That's fine. Mm-hmm. I'm not, this is going to sound crass, so take me out the equation, but if you had a choice of going into, and work under a manager, let's say Alec Ferguson, or go and be the number 9 for whoever the manager is at Scarborough, you do all day long, you take the pupillage and learn. But that's not because it's Alec Ferguson. That's because he put together a pure process around personal development.
Yes.
As opposed to this organization over here that might just be about execution. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, Andy. Development isn't for everyone, mate. Mm-hmm. It's not. It really isn't, right? Some people haven't got time for it. They're, and that's okay, right? It's just the legacy. I don't know. Your only legacy, in my opinion, can be the people, right? And that sounds really,
No, I agree with that. That's
bullshitish, but I mean that sincerely, right? So if you've done a good job, you're going to have a number of people who've worked for you who've gone on and done astounding things. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing you can do.
Yeah.
If they go on and do great things, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. The other thing I'll add to that as well, I always say, is that working for a year, let's say, as an SDR at Imply, is going to be 10x, literally 10x the enterprise sales experience you would get from being a AE at an expense software management company or a document management company, because the level of sales you're going to be exposed to is going to be so much more.
Look, again, take me out of the equation, right? You pick a leader, not a role, right? That's old as dirt, right? So, if you're going to go into battle, you need to pick the right team to be with, not necessarily just the glory, right? But again, some people want the glory. That's fine, right? That's cool, right? If that's not what you want. So, to be I'm going to, it's kind of a McMahon phrase, he's kind of coined it now, but to be a student of the game is, it genuinely means you're going to continue. And I've got these on my desk because I was literally talking to someone today about them. If you're going to literally say, I know spin, you need to know spin.
Yeah.
If you're going to say, I know MEDDIC, you've got to know MEDDIC, yes. Right? And this is why I don't like the term MEDDIC companies, because MEDDIC isn't a company thing. It's a personal thing. It's what you do. It's how you behave. It's how you communicate, how you're effective with your time, your words, how you're effective in delivering value. It's not a company thing. I really, really, really detest this. Recruiters have now coined MEDDIC companies.
Yes.
There are no MEDDIC companies. There are software companies. That's probably my last statement on it, mate.
I like it. You finished how you started, so you're consistent there. That's good. That's a good close. We're wrapping up. So
right, that's good.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure, as I say. And I can just hear it already. People hitting up my inbox wanting to get you back on. So I'm sure we can get much more into some of these topics again in the future. It'd be great.
All right. Cheers, Andy. Thanks, buddy.
Thank
Good
you,
luck.
sir. Cheers.